Something really crazy happened in the real estate market nationwide from the year 2020 to 2022, and we are still moving through it. And I think that we will continue to move through it for the next 2 to 7 years, shorter, longer. I don't really know. Nobody actually knows. No one has a crystal ball. My name is Mariam Hejazi. I've been helping people buy and sell residential real estate for over 12 years, and I've been loving Houston since 1987. Let's get into it. So, I don't need to tell you what 2020 was like, but something happened in real estate, and it probably happened for you. It happened in the realtor world as well, but people just wanted houses. House, 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 house. I sold a lot of real estate in the last 5 years. But something really interesting happened between 2020 and 2022. And this video is really a conversation with me and you, the viewer, on my thoughts on the market, where it may be going. Also, tidbits of conversation that I have had with real buyers walking in and out of open houses in real time in the last 90 days here in Houston. If you don't know this about me, I am the open house queen. I have already held 45 open houses this year, and I think by April I'd already held 25 open houses. So I do hold them very consistently, and I do this because it allows me to talk to real buyers in real time and get their thoughts. I have developers, builders, investors, and primary residence buyers come in and out of these open houses, and I have lots of very interesting conversations. And so I just want to talk with you about affordability. This isn't necessarily like a pricing crisis, and I know the interest is high, but it's not necessarily an interest rate crisis. It's an affordability crisis. So in 2020, people wanted houses. And there was like an insatiable appetite for real estate. And 2020, 21, and 22, the market did not sleep. Neither did most realtors. I sold a lot of real estate, I sold a lot of houses, I showed a lot of houses. I probably walk about, I don't know, 300, 400 houses a year, sometimes more than that. It depends on if I'm buyer heavy or listing heavy. So I see a lot and I hear a lot. So, a couple things just to kind of help you understand what we're going through, because 2025 has turned out to be a very weird market. Historically, the southern United States and the western United States are pretty even keeled. We don't have a lot of super slow months. There's never a time where there's like a very low demand for an extended period of time. But that is kind of what has happened in 2025. And in contrast, the North and the Northwest have seen, or no, sorry, the Northeast and the Midwest states. So we're talking like Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Illinois, Iowa, Ohio. Sorry, I'm looking at this map in my head. So the Midwest and the Northeast have had like multiple offers, not enough houses on the market, many buyers for just one house. And it's basically they're experienced what the South has been experiencing for like the last 6 years. And it's been kind of this topsy-turvy world. And we're kind of all scratching our heads on why. And there's some really good theories out there. And I don't know when this changes. So, first of all, the price jump between 2020 and 2022 is real. So I think the last time we had normal pricing was really 2019 and like January and February of 2020. The market has jumped in appreciation. It jumped like 10 years in 2 years. And so we are still seeing some appreciation in some markets, and Houston is very lucky that we are diversified. And so we do see a pretty steady 3 to 6 year property appreciation per year, year over year. But in some areas it's flat, in some areas it's negative in Texas and across the US. But prices jumped from 2020 to 2022 as much as they should have jumped in a decade. We did a decade's appreciation in 2 years, and it wasn't only because of it, well, it was because of demand, but also the interest rates were so low that people could afford to pay $100,000 over list price and it not make that much difference on their payment. There are some people out there right now that have a 2.3% interest rate, and those people are not selling their houses. And so that brings me to the first point. The people that have a 2.3 or 2.5 or 2.93% interest rate on a great house, odds are they're not going to sell it. Or if it's on the market, it's at a certain price and they don't have to reduce it. They don't have to sell it. They can afford to keep it. It may be paid off. And so they don't care if it sits on the market. And if a buyer really wants it, they're going to have to pay what it's listed at. So some people are able to hold on to these properties. Now, some of these 2.3 interest rate people, some of them have gotten a divorce. Some of them have to use the money in that asset in order to purchase at their new place, but a lot of them don't have to, which brings me to point two. There is not as much mobility in the American workforce as there has been in the very near and recent past. People are not moving to new cities at the rates that we used to. They're staying put because of job scarcity and real estate prices. So maybe they're moving from Texas to New York, which is a rare move. Actually, most people want to move from New York to Texas, but if they're having to move from Texas to New York, they may not be able to afford to move to New York, so they have to say no to the job. Or if they're moving to Scottsdale, I had a client that was going to move to Scottsdale, and when they really sat down and did the math, they couldn't really afford, even with the great appreciation on their house here in Houston, they couldn't really afford to buy a nice enough house to make the move worth it because they were going to have to move their whole life, their whole house, and several children, which also means new schools. So people are not moving as frequently as they have been in the last decade. So there's more listings on the market, but less listings on the market. That's why I said it's a very weird market. It's weird for a lot of different reasons. So interest rate has come up, obviously, since precisely the middle of 2022. So we have crazy appreciation in an abbreviated amount of time of real estate. What does that mean for interest rates? That means that a $500,000 house by 2019 standards appreciated to 800,000. And so you have a taxable appreciation value going up 300 grand. And so maybe a family could withstand the elevated interest rates at 500, but not 800. So the property values have skyrocketed and you have an interest rate on your loan amount. So unless you can take out equity and greatly diminish the amount of money that you are loaning, the amount of interest that you're paying is on a far greater principal for a similar home. So the jump in property appreciation has like given fuel to this fire that is the interest rate increase. And so it hurts extra because you're getting a higher rate of interest on a higher amount of principal for a similar house in which you could have purchased at a far lower rate and price in 2020. So in addition to increased sales price, which increases the amount of interest that you're paying. We're also looking at taxable value now. We're also looking at county appraisal values. So Houston has increased their appraisal value significantly over the last 5 years. Some people's property has gone up $150,000 in 1 year. Why is this important? Because the monthly tax amount that you pay goes up if your property appreciates. So if you bought a $500,000 house in 2019 and the county has it appraised at $800,000 now, you may be locked in a very low interest rate, but yay you. But now your taxes may be even double. Your property taxes may be double what you were paying in 2019. And for some people, it's the tipping point and it makes it unaffordable. So we have we went over taxes, we went over interest rates and appreciation. Now let's throw another cog in the wheel. Raise your hand if raise your hand if insurance has increased at all in the last 6 years. I'm going to raise both of my hands. Homeowners insurance, car insurance, it has all skyrocketed. So you could truly be paying double what you could have been paying in 2019 for a wide variety of prices. It is mind-boggling. So insurance is up, appreciation is up, which means taxable value is up. So your property taxes are up. The amount of interest that you're paying on your principal is up. The interest rate is up. So that's why I said we're having an affordability crisis. And again, this is just kind of a rhetorical conversation to educate you in case that you haven't had this thought process. This is what I live and breathe every day. And I don't really have an answer on how to fix the affordability issue other than if you can afford to buy a house, then you should buy a house. If you can't afford to buy a house, then come up with a plan to buy one. Because what are you going to do realistically? Let's say, okay, your thought process is everything's too expensive and I'm just going to keep renting. Are you going to be renting when you're 49 years old? Like, what does that realistically look like for you? Are you going to be in an apartment until you're 40? Like, how old are you now? Like, what does that look like in the future? Are you 27 and you're afraid of owning a house? Well, what does that look like when you're 37? Are you still going to be afraid to own a house and you're going to allow another 10 years of interest rates and appreciation and insurance to mess up your plan? Like what are you going to do? So again, these are rhetorical questions because my job ultimately is to serve the client or the consumer. Realtor's job is to like help the consumer. It's kind of like doctors take this oath like to do no harm. Realtors kind of take a very similar oath. We have a code of ethics. Like we have to act in our client's best interest. And I have a passion for real estate, and historically, owning property has never really been a bad investment. I have a very dear friend that I recently visited out in New Mexico, and her family used to own a substantial amount of land that they accumulated in the 1850s to the early 1900s. And at some point, some of the land has been sold off. And in today's times, 2025, her family has been in the community for close to 175 years. They are trying to hatch a plan to buy back the land that they lost. That's how important land and property is. And so if you're still trying to figure out, is homeownership worth it? It is. It's not, you're not always going to make a ton of money if you're looking to make a profit. But if you break even, you didn't pay rent for however many years that you lived in the house. If you just broke even. You have to live somewhere. You have to. You're either going to live in your mom's basement or in your old bedroom when you were growing up, or you're going to live in a rent house or an apartment that is run by like this gigantic conglomerate of private equity, or you can live in a house that you own. So if you can afford to buy a house, then buy a house. And if you can't afford to buy a house, then work on a plan to get there, even if it's a plan that takes you 2 to 3 years. It's worth it. So let's dive back into this affordability conversation. So the federal funds rate is also very high right now. And this rate, the federal funds rate, dictates like the interest that you pay on like credit cards. I'm not a finance expert. I do read a lot, but the federal fund rate is what was recently lowered 0.25%, and this will ease interest rates in some areas. Credit card interest rates have also been really high over the last few years. So some people that have been not been able to make enough money to cover all of their needs, or they were unemployed for a certain amount of time and they put things on credit cards. Now they're having a hardship in paying these credit card balances down. This goes all into this affordability basket that we're talking about. Student loans, if you still have student loans, you have to pay them. And there were some years that you didn't have to pay on the student loans, but they don't go away. As I'm sure you know, your student loans don't go away. Some people are fortunate enough to not have them or have paid them off earlier in life. If you still have student loans, you should pay them off as soon as possible. Some people also going to this affordability crisis. In 2021, some people did a 5-year ARM, or maybe they did a 5-year ARM in 2020 or early 2022. ARM stands for adjustable rate mortgage. And when we talk about a 5-year ARM, it's a 5-year adjustable rate mortgage. So for the first 5 years, you have a very low interest rate. But at the beginning of year 6, your interest rate could even triple in some cases. And so some people locked in a 5-year ARM between 2020, 21, and 22. And guess what? Those year 6 interest rate swings are kicking in. And you say, Mariam, why don't they just refi? That's a great question. Why don't they just refi? Well, if one of them is not working, or somebody got laid off and they're still unemployed, or they're not making as much money as they were in like these COVID boom years, they won't requalify for what their house is worth. So they can't refinance for the lower interest rate. And this is going to affect it's going to affect a section of the luxury market, actually, the above 2 million price point. Some of these people had 5-year ARMs in 2021 or 2022, and those year 6 interest rate fluctuations are coming due in 26 and 27. So it will be very interesting to keep an eye on the luxury market between 26 and 27. But of course, we don't know what's going to happen until we get there. So, insurance, tax value, how much property taxes you're paying, interest rate, and principal upon which you are paying interest on. Um, Everything is just so much more expensive. I'm sure that you see, even when you go to the grocery store, it just seems to cost like double or triple what it normally costs. So, if you call me and you say, Mariam, why has this house been on the market 100 days? Mariam, why is nothing selling? Mariam, why are all these houses on the market? It's because there's an affordability issue. And if you are selling your house, you have to come to grips with the realization that your average buyer is not able to afford what they could between 2020 and 2020, we'll call it 24 even. They are simply not able to afford. So if you get one or two qualified buyers giving you an offer, you should do everything you can to make that offer work. because our pool of truly qualified buyers has shrunk drastically in Texas, all over the South, and in the West. If you get a qualified buyer, please try to make the offer work. It may not be what you're dreaming of selling your house for, but at least you'll sell your house. You need to keep your long game in view. Are you trying to get to another state? Are you trying to get closer to your aging parents? Or maybe you're having grandchildren and you really need to sell this asset. Maybe you don't want to be a landlord. I showed a client a house in the Heights and it is adorable. I would have bought it if it was in the budget, but it wasn't. But the seller lowered it $75,000 in the first like 21 days because this seller has owned it forever and she can just drop the price. This goes back to this conversation I've had in a couple other videos. A seller may be willing to take less than their list price, but it depends on how much money they have in the house, how long they've owned this property, and where they're going, if anywhere. And if you're lucky enough to buy it from one of the few remaining mass landlords in Houston that just don't want to be landlords anymore, then you should take that opportunity and grip it with both hands and don't let it go because they are willing to give you a great house in a great location at a discount because they don't want to be landlords anymore. And that is the case with this house that dropped 75 grand in the first 21 days, and it was worth the initial list price. So these are my thoughts on the affordability crisis that we are experiencing, and it will get better if house or with if mortgage rates come down, that it will get better. I think that if rates come down to 5.9, the market will ease this like death grip that is on the housing market in the western and the southern United States will loosen. Don't forget that housing supports, I think, like 25 different fields. So you may have your conspiracy theories about housing and mortgages and the American housing market, but say what you want. I won't necessarily deny it, but what I will die on a hill for is that housing supports so many different trickle down jobs. And so if housing rebounds, so will a large section of the economy. And especially if people can start moving for different jobs, that also helps the employment numbers. So again, I am not an expert in all of this, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts and I have a lot of conversations with people coming in and out of my open houses that I host here in Houston almost every weekend. So I always have a bead on the current buyer sentiment, which is very important if you are buyer heavy and listing heavy. Because if you're buyer heavy as an agent, you need to know what the buyers are thinking out there so you can better prepare your buyers against their competition. And then conversely, if you are listing heavy, you need to know what the buyer sentiment is because that is your audience. The house is a product, and the audience, your buyer pool, are the home buyers out there. So you need to know what the buyers are thinking at all time. And one more thought before I leave you. Buyers control the market, not sellers. Buyers control the market, not the sellers. The sellers can try to set the price, but they're only able to sell it for what a willing and able buyer will pay for it. So, contrary to popular belief, sellers do not control the market. Buyers control the market. So that's why we are seeing a chokehold right now in this 2025 weird market. But there is still lots and lots of opportunity out there. I have been preaching the gospel of it is a great time to buy a house If you can afford to buy a house, it is one of the best times in the last 15 years for you to be able to buy a house. And I'm happy to talk you through more of my thoughts or debate you on anything I covered in this video. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment sections. Please send this video to someone who needs to know. Sorry, there's a lot of words today. My name is Mariam Hejazi. I've been helping people buy and sell residential real estate for over 12 years, and I've been loving Houston since 1987. Like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.